right, so I'm looking at these pictures of Nikola Jokić and his 361 Big 3 Future PE in the high top versus this one in the mid. And yeah, there are some differences, some things we got to call out. However, there are a lot of similarities, and I think the differences that are on his shoes, I'm not so sure they're gonna be that big of a difference on yours if you can make just a few small modifications. So, get into them. All right, so the biggest differences between Jokic's PE shoe and the ones you can get is obviously in the ankle collar. Now his go up obviously into a high top. They go vertical with the lace eyelet system. However, I think the bigger issue between the one that he can get and the one that you and I can get is the tongue. Now it is still the same geometry and it still does have that double wrap in the forefoot, which is nice. It has this elastic piece that goes over the distal part of the tongue, covers everything up, except the tongue in the regular 361 is basically nothing, right? You know, the lace line does really dig in on your foot. It really does need some padding. However, on his shoe, there is padding on there. So obviously that was a big enough issue for him to get some padding put into the tongue of that shoe. His tongue is also much longer, goes up the leg. You can do the same thing by just putting in some felted foam under there or a high heel pad underneath the tongue of the shoe. You can pretty much get the same deal there. I would be augmenting this tongue because it was definitely the weakest part of the shoe. Definitely was like the weak link in a shoe that otherwise is outstanding. The other thing is, you look at the ankle collar of these, the padding is just out of this world. This thing sucks you into the heel and the ankle of this shoe so well. It is like triple thickness padding back there, and it just feels like a bear hug around your ankle. It is such a nice feeling. Really a big difference between the rear foot feeling of this shoe and the midfoot feeling of this shoe. The lace line on his as well as on ours does have a lot of connection into the strobe board. It has roping here that goes all the way from the rear foot into the forefoot. Now this is double layered, right? So it is going through the regular lace eyelet as well as going down into those ropes in the strobe board. So the lockdown is outstanding. It's just in the midfoot, it doesn't feel like it, right? Like mentally, you're not feeling like it's a super substantial shoe versus in the forefoot as well as in the rear foot. But I think the craziest part of this whole upper saga is its breathability. If you look at the breathability test, heated up 144.2 degrees, which I would say is pretty typical for a more maximalist shoe, right? A shoe that you would see a huge center wearing. However, you look at the breathability mapping on this, there's really no air getting out of anywhere that you would think, right? You would think it'd just be blowing out of everywhere here because of all the meshing. But because there's so much overlap underneath of the shoe, a lot of that fog does get trapped into there. I noticed when I was tearing down this shoe a couple hours after the last time I played in them, I could still feel moisture in the rear foot in these. So there is potential for a lot of moisture and heat to be trapped into these shoes. Now, the weirder thing is, if you look at the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, once again, you would think that this meshing, as you saw in the microscope, it looks pretty open and airy, like it's not gonna do much. The burr does not get through this whatsoever. It's really, really strong. So these shoes are just, you know, sometimes not what they appear on the outside, almost like the real Joker. But switching gears from the oddities of the uppers into just the absolute machine that the midsole is, the midsole on these is one of my absolute favorites, I think, maybe that I've just tested in general. This thing is a giant bed of Pebex-based foam. It is incredibly dense feeling underfoot, so it feels really substantial, but also very comfortable. The shank is mid-loaded, right? So it's between the two slabs of foam. It is carbon fiber and goes from the rear foot and then dives down into the midfoot of this shoe. Now it does then extend into the forefoot as a bottom-loaded shank, because it is going into the forefoot. It seems like, though, the main feature of it, at least to me, was coming down on my heel and feeling that extra spring right when you came down. Actually felt like there was something still left when you'd be going back for that next step. So even though it does go into the forefoot, I did want to bring more attention to the rear foot of the shanks. I think that's what's doing, I think, the majority of the work in the shoe, and that's what's going, I'd say that's what you're gonna be feeling the most in the shoe. And just looking at that setup on the bound tight test, got 41 centimeters in the heel, then 45 in the forefoot. But what is the most astounding part of that test is, typically when there is a shank underneath of where that ball bearing is being hit, it'll deaden it a lot, right? And you won't get the true essence of the foam. Whereas in this one, it seems like that shank's got enough play that it just popped it right back up. You can see where the resonance comes from there, where that diving board effect comes from there. So it's like a posterior diving board effect. There's a new made-up term for this channel, but no matter what you want to call it, these shoes just have a tremendous amount of pop from crash landings and a tremendous amount of pop when you are using that shank to launch, when you're going back and forth, north to south. It's really no matter where you're trying to get air from, where you're trying to get speed or launch from, these have you covered. So when I say we're gonna look at the outsole tread, you really have to have good eyes to see it, especially in this colorway, just because of the translucency of the rubber, as well as all the gold flakes in there. But the outsole tread itself, it almost looks like an organic chemistry set, right? Like you're setting up bonds, right? And on the medial side, you get a lot more continuous waving there, but on the lateral side, it really does break apart. Those act like suction cups though. Oh man, you can hear them on court, right? Just sticking, right? Look at the grip test ramp. 47 degrees is when these things slipped. I mean, they're just incredibly tacky shoes. The problem comes in is, you look at the outsole durability test on these, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Yeah, you didn't even get a millimeter of damage, but when I did that test, you can kind of see what happens when the tread starts to wear down. It's thin, and in some areas, there's not a lot of room between those thin treads, so you're gonna start to meld them together. I would say because there's these macro channels here, these divots in the tread, you'll still get some decent grip out of these, and just the compound of the rubber is really good. To me, if you wanna keep these at their peak, I would keep these on an indoor rubberized or hardwood court. You can use them outdoors for sure. They're just, to me, they're, like I said, the durability is there, the durometer is there, everything else there. I would just say the way these things wear is why you might start to get into trouble with these after a couple months of outdoor use. So going back to the crazy launch of the midsole, look at the speed ratio of these, coming in at a 2.88, shank score of 0.2, puts them up to a 3.08, and I think they deserve every bit of that score. They're not as heavy as you would think they're going to be, right? They're a little bit of a lighter shoe than they appear, right? They're still a substantial shoe. You would just look at this TPU lateral stabilizer here, just, you know, how bulky the shoe appears. The shoe is not all that encumbering to your feet. Like I said, first launch in these, fantastic. Going north to south or getting up to speed for a little longer periods of time, also really great for these fast breaks and these hustle plays, outstanding. The one thing I would say is that sometimes it feels like you're yanking the shoe because the tongue is not that substantial. So like I said, if you pad it up, it's gonna feel a little bit more even on your foot, or if you wear 2 pairs of socks. Just something to make the tongue feel not as flimsy is gonna give you a mental boost in these shoes. The shoes are fantastic on their own, it's just, you just gotta get over that tongue. So looking at the Big 3 Futures fit, it actually just fits pretty generous, right? If you look at the pure just stats of the shoes. However, once again, because of that tongue, if you can get these as one-to-one as possible, you're gonna do better and better in them. So I'd say a narrow foot, I would probably go down a half size in these. Even a medium foot, if you wanna get that one-to-one performance fit, I'd say go down a half size, a 2E true to size. A 4E, I'd try just to go true to size on these. I think the more snug you fit in this shoe, the less the tongue is a problem for you. And I think the more you kind of feel one-to-one with it. For any type of snake bites on the bottom of your foot, whether it be Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis, ball of foot pain, whatever, these are fantastic for. If you are somebody with a really high midfoot or a midfoot cavus, that tongue's gonna bother you, right? If you're somebody with, you know, kind of arthritis in your midfoot, have a really bulky midfoot, that's what's going to bother you, and you're gonna wanna start to pad this tongue up. I am gonna be doing a video in the future about all the ways you can customize the tongue of the shoe and other parts of the shoe, so I will be getting into that in the future, but suffice to say, the top of your foot, midfoot, is gonna be the Achilles heel in this, no pun intended. Everything on the bottom of your foot, fantastic. But when looking at the performance capabilities of the Big 3 Future, I really don't think you have to look any further than the person that's wearing them. But even at that, I guess I really shouldn't say that, because I do think these also fit a more shifty guard, right? You know, someone that's trying to create space, someone that wants the ultimate grip in their shoes. You know, these are great for a center because, like I said, that posterior base shank and how forgiving it is for crash landing, just going up and down, up and down, up and down. But they also do not feel very encumbering. So if you are somebody just stalking the perimeter of the court, trying to create space, trying to really outwork somebody with footwork or trying to outwork someone on the ground, I think these do just as well. So it's really a nice shoe that spans kind of the panacea of players. Obviously, the best tools in this shoe are for someone that needs them around the rim for sure. This is definitely a shoe that keeps your legs feeling fresh after jump and jump and jump and jump and jump and crash and crash and crash for sure. But there's enough in this for someone who's like, you know, a lighter, shiftier guard, shorter player or something like that. So I do think there's enough different in Jokic's shoe, right? That's making him more comfortable for him. Remember, mid tops and high tops don't stop ankle sprains. It's, you know, it's the midsole geometry. It's how the outsole and the midsole interact, and it's how bottom stable the shoe is. But I would say if he gets this shoe on, feels that tongue, I think that's when he's probably saying I need something more substantial. And the longer the tongue is going up your leg, a lot of times you're sharing the load, right, of that tongue with a larger surface area. And some people just like the feelings of a high top, right? You know, a lot of that's just personal preference. Those are probably all the reasons why his are going up higher on the leg. And I'm sure when he gets a signature shoe, you'll probably see one come out that is just like his with a little bit of a higher collar on them as well. So love to hear your thoughts, especially if you are trying to pick these up. I was really glad I was able to purchase a pair of these because these were just an absolute just blast to play in. I think a lot of people are probably going to think the same thing once they get them on foot. So love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below and what you think is going to be in his signature shoe coming down the line. I have some ideas on probably what they're going to do, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. And if you want to see the shoe that we all expected Nikola Jokić to wear, the Nike GT Jump 2 going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your urban foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.